If you have a mental health issue, should you let your boss know? What about your teammates? Millions of people struggle with mental health, and yet most are reluctant to let anyone know about it. From being considered taboo to fear of being labeled as unstable or being seen as a complainer, many people just try to power through. But what if it was okay to be upfront about your struggles? And what if by doing so you could find ways to work with them and thus not let them get in the way of your performance? Hi, I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to Launch to Legendary, where we get to hear from people who have taken the ordinary and turned it into the extraordinary, who found opportunities where most people would only see obstacles, and who've defined success in their own terms. Meet Bryce Seto, a successful senior vice president at an insights consultancy who scaled startups from $0 to $10 million, and who also happens to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. He's on a mission to help others overcome the stigma of mental health issues while inspiring leaders to support openness and vulnerability in the workplace. Today, Bryce will be talking about the importance of addressing your own mental health as a leader in an open, honest, and authentic way, why disorders are not the barriers we think they are, and how we can accept and overcome them, even use them as strengths in our work, and why vulnerability is a key to success as a leader, and we do not need to be afraid of it. So let's sit down with Bryce and learn how we can support ourselves and team members with mental health issues so that we can all be our best selves. Bryce, thank you so much for joining me here on A Seat at the Table. It's really wonderful to have you on the show. I'm really excited to hear what you're talking about with regard to leadership, because we talk a lot about leadership on this podcast, but we've never really tackled the subject of mental health. And yet mental health has become a huge and increasingly important topic, both at work and elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here, Jane. Thank you so much for giving me this platform to help share my story and talk about my perspective. It's something near and dear to my heart. And in terms of my own personal journey and where I've gone through life is just, getting an understanding of how important addressing my own mental health has been. But not only that, that was kind of step one for me. The second part in this phase of my journey has been being open about that and being honest about it and being truly authentic to who I am and my whole self. And I've found that has led to a lot more breakthroughs, important conversations, and even better work overall in terms of what I'm contributing to the world and in my work and my relationships and everything else. So it's great to be here and be able to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you're able to share on that topic, because I think that a lot of people face a similar situation. And yet, even though we're more comfortable addressing mental health, we're not at that level where we're 100% comfortable, particularly in the framework of a workplace. So perhaps you can start by talking about, share your view on addressing your own mental health as a leader and in an open, honest, and authentic way. I mean, what do you see around that? How do you do that while still maintaining a productive and professional environment?
No, yeah, that's a great question. So as an executive, I probably am quite similar to a lot of people who climb up the ranks, where I use work kind of as my escape. So it's an easy excuse to I don't maybe I'm going through something, maybe I feel a certain type of way, but I'm just going to do more work. I'm going to be more ambitious. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to wake up earlier in the morning. I'm going to work later at night. I'm going to stay at the office, and I'm just going to compile more and more tasks for me to really avoid addressing what my real situation is, or having that hard conversation and addressing it. So I actually kind of went through a situation where it was earlier in my career, but I was quickly climbing up. I was working as a salesperson, account executive for a tech company, and traveling around North America, building up my portfolio business, and traveling, selling, doing the thing that you do as you're ambitious and trying to grow your career. And I kind of hit a breaking point. I was in New York, and I was there for a client meeting, and just in my hotel, I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I showed up the next week and I quit. I just walked out. I didn't have a job or anything lined up. I just kind of walked away from that job because I knew inside it was kind of eating me up. And then I spiraled and I kind of hit rock bottom. And you do what you do as you're trying to, if you've ever kind of gone through that part in your life, it's like, what did I just do? But I knew I needed to do something. So at that point, I had a really supportive partner. I was doing a lot of other things. I was pursuing more creative endeavors, but she's like, you know what, maybe you should go see somebody. Maybe you should talk to a therapist and just figure out what's going on in your mind, and let's see if we can work this out. So I did. And that was kind of the first time, and I was in my late 20s at the time. I was an adult, but still quite young, and I'm very grateful that I was able to do that at the age that I was, because when I was able to sit down with someone and talk to, first it was a social worker, and they brought in a psychiatrist, and I was kind of telling them what I was dealing with and what I was going through. Um, they were able to diagnose me quite quickly, and I turned out I had a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And so getting that and being in an environment, I mean, first it led me to the whole freak out and the Googling and going down the rabbit holes and like, oh my God, my life has changed. But the second part was like relief. It's like, oh, you know what? I can actually put a label on this thing, and there's understanding and research on the thing that it is that I have. That's a relieving thing. It's like, this feeling that I've had of like the way I feel about my emotions and handling relationships and depression and all of these things, where you just kind of feel lost and you spiral and you try to manage it through working more or finding different ways to escape. It's like, you know what? Actually, I have professional help here. I have they put me through, and they kind of fast tracked me into a dialectical behavior therapy program, a DBT, which is like group therapy where you sit down, you learn skills like for cognitive behavior and emotional regulation and mindfulness. I spent a whole year doing that. I was out of the workforce. I spent a year really just working on myself. I fulfilled my time with other creative endeavors. I started doing other things that I just wanted to do. I was acting, I was auditioning, I was starting to get like commercial and TV and film work and doing improv comedy, like things that I wanted to do while really working on myself. But going through that process was such a blessing for my life, because everything from that point, after that year I took off and really got the help that I needed, really started to open up myself, being more comfortable with who I am authentically. And then when I returned to the workforce, it was like a fast track to an executive role in terms of impact on the business. I joined a company kind of pre-revenue, and we scaled it to millions of dollars. And I was a huge part of that, running kind of like sales and marketing, but it was as me entirely. It wasn't like this feeling I had before as I got to show up as somebody else at work. I got to, the imposter syndrome or whatever. It was like, no, you know what? Going through getting that help and addressing the kind of deepest, darkest issues of myself allowed me to kind of bring that part to work, which then allowed me to do better work. And I reaped all the benefits that went towards that. So there's my long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I really applaud you for taking that action, because so few people do, in part because I suppose people feel maybe embarrassed, ashamed, or in a lot of cases, people just don't know where to go to get help. So I think there's many different obstacles that people face. How can, people, how do we in the workplace help people who work there be able to get the assistance and support they need without us sort of crossing a barrier? Because after all, it is a workplace, and it's you don't want it to become, I suppose, too much of a, I don't know what the right word would be, but
yeah,
you don't want everyone focusing in on their personal issues at work. So you need that balance.
Yeah, we also have a job to do, and that's completely appropriate and understandable. We all just can't show up to work as a puddle of mud and just sit on the ground and talk about our feelings. Like, there's jobs to do, and I completely understand that. But you touched on something that is really interesting, and that I'm kind of on my mission right now to help fight, which is the stigma behind it, right? Is
Right.
this idea of mental health being this really big deal that you're not supposed to talk about, and there's different kind of like cultural issues and generational issues with it in the workplace and cultures that you have to really consider when you think about that. Like, I'm an Asian man, and in Asian culture, there's a massive stigma about talking about your feelings, and it's not something that we do. It's all about education and honor, and not about how it is that you feel. And as a man, there's the other side of that, which is the toxic masculinity side, and being a man, and et cetera, et cetera. So to me, in terms of how do you manage this in the workplace when there's all of this stigma and things that we have to do, and there's still this culture of like capitalism and we got to get the job done, the first step in my mind is to lead by example. So for me, I've been very public and honest and open about my disorder and what it is that I've had to deal with in my own journey to get to where I am, in hopes that helps other people realize that, hey, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. And that's kind of my stance on it, is it should be normal. It should be okay to come up to work and be like, hey, I have ADHD, I have borderline personality, I have bipolar, I have et cetera, et cetera. We all have something. We all have traumas that we've had to deal with and work through. And admitting that and owning that as part of your identity, I think, is a big first step. The second part kind of touches on this idea of vulnerability, right? And there is a fine line when it comes to vulnerability. I truly, wholeheartedly believe that vulnerability is the key that unlocks connection and unlocks great work. So in order to build great relationships, you need to kind of put yourself out there and be vulnerable. In order to do great work and put it in the world, you need to show up and be vulnerable. At the same time, that doesn't mean being completely vulnerable and showing up completely emotionally naked to every environment, because that's not appropriate, right? There's a two-way kind of relationship and understanding that goes within vulnerability. Is you have to understand and make sure that the audience that is receiving that vulnerability, or that person that's receiving the vulnerability, is deserving of it, is understanding of it, and can take care of it, right? Can cherish that and make sure that that it's not going to go to waste or be stomped on, or you know, not be an effective use of your opening up. So what I mean by that is, you know, perhaps going and showing up to your boss and telling them that you're sad is not the most effective way to get the job done, because your boss is not someone that's going to be receptive of that, right?
Right.
But there is definitely an opportunity for you to set those boundaries and make sure that you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. Like, you know what? I am not showing up completely to work as my complete self, and I know that I need to deal with something. Excuse me, boss, I need 2 days off. I'm not feeling well. And that is the same thing. Like, being mentally ill is the same thing as being physically ill. Like, take that sick day, take your time off, and go and deal with that, so you can then show up to work in your whole self. But I've also found in the workplace, if you are able to build that trust and you know that audience within the workplace is deserving and receptive of that vulnerability, you can still build those bonds and those relationships in the work environment. Just holistically, you just have to be careful and pick and choose your battles and be aware as to who's deserving of that, who's going to get you to where you want to go as an individual, versus who, you know, can take that and weaponize it against you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because you have, on the one hand, people who will weaponize that against you. But then on the other hand, from a leadership point of view, you have employees who will use that in order to get special consideration against instead of other people. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find, it's a delicate balance, and it's not just with mental health. It's also with people who come in with physical health problems, right? It's
Definitely.
how do you balance all of these things in a workplace in order to create the right supportive environment, and yet at the same time run it as an organization, get things done, understand that customers want things, and that you
Yeah.
need to deliver on whatever you're promising to deliver on. It's
Yeah,
complicated.
it is. And I think it comes down to two main things. It's culture and it's communication. So
Right.
like the culture side of it is, as a leader, we have a unique privilege and almost a responsibility to really set the example of what we want the company culture to be, right? And I feel like as leaders, we kind of hover along the lines of playing it safe, because leadership's a hard thing, and a lot of us have had to fight and get to the top and kind of work our way to get there. And you know, we want to protect that. And it's hard to ask a leader to, hey, now that you're at the top, let's risk it all. Let's open up and tell everybody, you know, all of your problems. Like that's a tough thing to do. So I find that leaders are actually the opposite and will keep their cards closer to their chest when they're at the top, because of that vulnerability, because they know that there's people gunning for them, or maybe they have imposter syndrome and don't feel like they deserve it and they have to act a certain way, etc. But the other side of it is, if you as a leader kind of take that first step as being incredibly authentic, or being even vulnerable openly, what that does is it sets your culture and gives permission to the rest of your people. And I do, again, wholeheartedly believe that people that lead with vulnerability are going to do better work, first and foremost. The second part of that is, and you mentioned on this, is like, how do you make sure that people don't take advantage of it? Well, the second part of that comes down to just, that's core management, communication, understanding we as a business, this is our mission. This is the non-negotiables in our business that we have to adhere to. And, you know, wherever you are, understanding the culture, your job is to make sure that whatever our key performance indicators are as a business that run, whatever our KPIs are, you know, If you need to take some time off, we support you. We're going to be there for you one step of the way. But your responsibility is to make sure that you're still achieving whatever our company's mission and goals are. I think that second part, if those two things aren't aligned, is when it all goes haywire. That second part, businesses don't typically do a great job of continually, instilling whatever those mission, vision, values are across the organization and communicating against them. A lot of people I know that work in companies really have no idea what those missions are, and they're kind of micromanaged at a middle management level. And so if you at the leadership level are doing both of those things right, I think you can build a well-oiled machine of vulnerability, honesty, and people that want to show up to work wholeheartedly and will want to do good work and go above and beyond for you.
I think that's a really good way to frame it. And like you're saying, you do need to have those boundaries on both sides. So you want to be able to create an environment that's supportive, but as you said, you have to say to the person, I'm going to give you the space to work out what you need to work out, but at the same time, ultimately you need to deliver on the deliverables that we've agreed upon. So I think that's quite fair and quite an equitable way to look at it. Now you talk about the fact that disorders are not the barriers that we think they are, and that we can actually almost leverage them and use them as strengths. How might someone do that?
That's a great question. And I think about this a lot in my own life. So I can speak from my perspective as someone that has borderline personality disorder, which carries a ton of stigma. If anyone does have any awareness of it, it's usually in a negative light. It's seen as there's actually people, professionals, psychiatrists and therapists who will not treat people that have BPD because they're too difficult. So
Really?
this is a disorder that is so stigmatized that professionals don't want to touch it. And then where does that leave us? Where are we supposed to get our help, right? But and you can kind of see where that stigma comes from, because BPD in general basically just means, in a nutshell, that we are more sensitive and feel emotions a lot more intensely than the average person. So, and that will manifest and show itself in a variety of different ways. In some words, sometimes it might be more externally, where people might be more prone to outbursts or emotional dysregulation, sad, angry, yelling, rage, etc. Or it might be internally, where it might be an internalized version of BPD, where you might literally shut down from the world and disassociate, which is another negative way to manage emotions. All this to say, there's also beauty in that, and this is kind of where I'm going. I've started a newsletter, and I've been now just writing and sharing and talking about my disorder and my experience in the world. And what I'm realizing is that there's beauty in that intense feeling of emotions if I have the awareness and the acceptance of the fact that I'm feeling them. I have two beautiful little girls who have been just a magnificent part of my life, because what they do for me is they allow me to process and feel emotions like I'm a kid again every single day. And that's such a treat, right? Because when we get into adulthood, I found that there would be days, weeks, months even, where there's emotions that I just didn't feel. I haven't been sad for 6 months. I haven't been, you know what I mean? We just don't expose to that. We go to work, we just kind of go through the motions, and we don't really get to feel the entire spectrum of all of our emotions. And we need that as humans, right? We need that to really feel a full life, and to not, as an Asian man, shut down, because this is what we've been trained to do, is to swallow your feelings and not talk about them. And that really prevents you from having the best, most full life that you possibly can. So for me, it's that acceptance of hey, you know what? I am more sensitive. I might feel emotions a little bit more intensely, but that's also amazing. And let me share that. Let me write about it. Let me really find out what that is and help other people kind of get in touch with those emotions as well. And in the workplace, that allows me to be a lot more empathetic. It allows me to really help people dig deep into where it is that they're feeling, what the next level is, because that's how you motivate people, is really finding out what motivates them and pulling that out of them, what really gets their heart singing and their eyes widening, and so from that perspective, it's actually looking at the other side of that. And I feel obviously I know borderline personality disorder very well because I have it, but looking at other disorders as well, I mean, ADHD, etc. There's different angles that you can look at them from and see okay, I have this, I accept that I have it, but what does this mean? Is it all negative? There's always something there that you can just tap into that might just allow you to offer more into the world that you're not.
Right. And I think that's an important point, because I think that Initially, as you're saying, we brushed all of this under the carpet. Nobody wanted to admit that they had any kind of psychological or mental health disorder because that was frowned upon. You were seen as an outcast. Then people started to accept it, but still stigmatized it. And then, in a sense, people started to see it as an obstacle. And now it's a matter of trying to see, how do you, if I'm understanding you correctly, how do we help people look at the situation and then find ways to work with it instead of against it so that they can become productive?
Yeah, there's something I learned in therapy, which was called, it's a skill called radical acceptance. If you get taught to it in cognitive behavior therapy and DBT, which is literally what it says. It's radically accepting what the situation is, and we suffer a lot living in a world of not accepting. I'm really frustrated with where I am in life, and I just can't accept the fact that I'm here, right? But there's something powerful about when you sit down and it's like, and you just literally accept. You accept your situation, your family situation, your life situation, where you are, who you are. That allows you then to move forward, right? And I guess what I'm saying more than anything, it's not so much like when life gives you lemons, make lemonades. It's really accepting the fact that you have those lemons and kind of
Right.
holding them close and bringing them along with you for the ride, right? Because regardless of where you would love to be or what you think you need to be in life or what the world's told you that you're not, you are who you are. And owning that and getting to a place of true authenticity and bringing that to your work, I think is really your competitive edge, right? Everyone's talking about, I think I hear about this from entrepreneurs all the time. It's like, how do I find my niche, or content creators? Is I don't know what my niche is to create content. Your niche is you. If you are fully you, nobody else in the world can compete with that because they're just trying to pretend to be you. Like that is your uniqueness, and the closer you can get to owning that. And I'm just taking that perspective from mental health because that is I believe like one of the hardest journeys to go on is fully accepting a disorder, a mental health issue that you might have, depression, anxiety, etc. But recognizing that, bringing it into the world, and taking it with you no matter where you go.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. Now, you talk about vulnerability as a key to success as a leader. How can we sort of embrace that as opposed to being afraid of it? We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
I think it's a really good question. I think you're always going to be afraid of it. And no matter, and that's my experience, which is that it's always a scary thing. It's always a scary thing to show up and to talk about you and to be you fully and to share and to open up. That's always going to be scary. But my perspective is to do it anyways, because by not doing it, you're missing out on the ability of having great relationships, on being your whole self, on doing great work. So what I would look at that as is, instead of thinking of, how do I not be afraid? It's how do you accept fear? How do you embrace fear? And then how do you make a decision to do it anyways, right? The other skill I would bring into this conversation that I learned in therapy is called opposite action. And opposite action is essentially just when you have that negative feeling or that negative urge to do something, to not do something that you need to do. You need to go to that job interview, but you just want to hide under your covers in your bed, or you need to go do that client call. You need to get on a podcast and talk about a very vulnerable situation. To do the opposite of what your urge is telling you, because your urge is not leading you to where you want to go. It's trying to lead you to safety, but safety a lot of times isn't real. There's no scary lion standing outside the door at the job interview that's going to bite your head off, right? The worst thing that's going to happen is you won't get the job. Apply to another job, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that fear is going to be there. And it's just learning to live with that fear, because going and doing the thing other anyways is going to get you to the other side of where you want to go in life.
I think that's a really good point. And I think that it's probably the biggest hurdle for most people, regardless of whether they have a very severe mental health issue or maybe just a slight sort of I don't know what you would call it. But I think for most people, to be able to push past the fear, as you're saying, to be able to do it anyway, is probably the biggest challenge most people face.
Definitely. And there's a stat out there actually where there was a poll of Americans who named the number one fear that they have, and over dying, the number one fear is public speaking. So people would rather die than to speak in public.
Wow.
And that speaks to the power that fear has, which is that how scary is it to speak in public? We all know that it is, and we all are like, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. I don't want to do that. But what's the worst thing that would happen? How often does the absolute worst possible thing happen when anybody speaks in public? Usually someone goes and does a talk, whether it's tens or hundreds of thousands of people listen to it, see that talk, and then we forget about it. Or it was a great talk and it resonated with us. Nothing really happened. You just did a talk for 40 minutes and then you left the stage, right? But that people are so terrified of that, even more than they are of dying, which to me just tells me that this concept of fear is a lot more intense than reality is, than what the actual real risk is, right? And it's instilled in all of us, and maybe it's an evolution thing because we had to spend our lives being in fear because we were running away from animals and predators, etc. But we're not anymore, right? For the most part. The lucky of us who get to just be leaders and work in business for a living, our fears are irrational, and so they're going to be with you. You have to accept that they exist, but it's that acceptance and just bringing it along with you. The way I wrote about it the other day about, I think of fear as like, it's always going to be there. It's like my buddy in the passenger seat. So we're going somewhere and you can come sit next to me and we're going to go together if you want to, but we're going to get there regardless, because I need to do the thing that I need to do. And I've actually have begun to live my life kind of seeing fear as a compass. Like fear is now, I know if I'm afraid, I'm probably going in the right direction, right? Because that fear, that anxiety, that feeling is telling me that, you know what, you're afraid of this thing, which means it's important to you. So go and do that thing. Right.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And I think that everybody at some level or another, in some aspect of their life, faces some kind of fear, anxiety, a wall of awful, as we often call it, that they have to overcome. And it's not easy to do. It's not. And I think that what you've been sharing with us here is important for people to understand and to be able to think about that in context of their own life.
100%. 100%. And I think one of the other things that I'd want to mention as well is that you're not alone. You always think about this idea of mental health and depression in your journey as to being an individual. I have to get through this. The way you get through it is by connection and by opening up. And that's where the vulnerability comes from. It's going and getting help. And that's a hard thing. And I know, especially for leaders to do, which is to ask for help and to know that you need to rely on other people. But that is how you get through it. Like shame thrives alone, but it cannot thrive surrounded by other people in public. Like once you start connecting with other people, sharing stories, opening up, that makes this whole process a lot easier. And it's also the way that you will kind of start to move throughout your journey and get to where you want to go.
That's such a powerful statement. And I think that everybody listening to this can really resonate with that, because we've all faced that at some point or another in our lives. Now, Bryce, how can people find you? I think a lot of people would love to be able to connect with you and be able to learn from you. Where can they find you? Where can we find your newsletter?
Yeah, so my newsletter. So I'm writing twice a week. It's on bryceseto.com. So BRYCESETO.com. So you can subscribe to the newsletter. Everything is free. So I'm just kind of writing and putting things out there. And right now it's a mix of personal essays. I write a lot about my own identity and my own journey with my own identity. I write a lot about leadership and things that I've learned. in terms of launching new projects and creative endeavors, especially. So there's a mix. I like to say that I'm on the intersection of business, creativity, and mental health. Somewhere in there is kind of where I live. So that's kind of the first place I would go is my newsletter, bryceseto.com. And then the second platform that I'm most active on is Instagram, which is just at Bryce Seto, so at BRYCESETO. So go ahead and follow me. Everything there is public as well. And but the first place I would look at is my newsletter, and then reach out. I mean, if you subscribe to my newsletter, you can just send me a note right after you subscribe, and then we can get in touch. I would love to hear from anybody and to build those conversations. Even if anybody just had any questions on my journey or wanted to share their story, I'd be more than happy to have those conversations with anybody that wanted to.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm going to put all of those links in the show notes. And I would really encourage people listening to this to subscribe to Bryce's newsletter. I'm sure it's packed with valuable information. So, Bryce, thank you so much for joining us here on A Seat at the Table. It has really been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Jane. If I can do one more last little plug. So I just founded last week with my co-founder. For anybody listening in Canada, we have a fund. It's called Blossom Mental Health Fund. It's specific to Asian Canadians and supporting Asian Canadians with access to mental health resources, funding, and just normalizing the stigma that exists within our communities. So you could check that out. It's blossommentalhealthfund.org. Take a look at what we're doing there, and we're in our fundraising stage right now to gather donations and put out content and to help people get access to important mental health that is competent and understanding of the Asian experience. So please take a look there as well.
Well, I'll definitely put a link for that in the show notes as well. And yes, I would encourage anybody listening to this to support that fund because it sounds like it's really life-changing for so many people.
Yeah, and it has been for me. So that's my journey right now is how do I help others get access to the help that I was able to get, luckily, that helped really change my life and allow me to do the things that I'm able to do and live effectively in my relationships, my work, and etc. So thanks so much for having me, Jane.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.